Hamster wheel. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the regular Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of Wednesday, January 17th. My name is Ian Morrison. I will be your chair today. I would like to begin by recognizing that the CVRD is on the unceded territories of the Cowichan, Malahat, Subasat, Halalt, Penellicut, Staminas, Layaxan, Paquichan, Diti-Dot, and Pachi-Dot nations, whose people have walked gently here for thousands of years. With that, I turn to Ms. Boyd.
Thank you, Chair. Could I get, I hear an echo. Hello? Hello? Nope.
That's you.
Apologies. Approval of the agenda. I have the first item, close CSR 1. It was uploaded and republished. I have a second item, correction in the resolution for report, my apologies. I believe it's emergency services. My apologies. So it was emergency services regarding boundary extension into Goldstream Heights Fire Protection Service area. So a new report was uploaded for that. And there is one addition to closed, CSNB1. It's a verbal employees relation. And it'd be an additional to motion to close on that. So if I please could get the motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. I should note that with a number of our directors doing the safe thing and staying at home, that if you would wave frantically if you're trying to get my attention, or maybe even use the hand up function at the bottom of the screen, that would be helpful. We have 3 directors in the room and a number of staff, and this is a little different balance than we normally have, and hopefully we can get through, we can have a productive afternoon and make our way through in good order. With that, I go to Ms. Boyd.
Thank you, Chair. We have the adoption of the minutes. The Special Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of December 14th, 2023 be adopted.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on those items? Seeing none, all those in favor? Are there any opposed? I see none opposed, the motion carries.
M2, Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of December 20th, 2023 be adopted. Sorry, that's the minutes.
Do we have a mover? Moved, seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Are there any opposed? I see none opposed, the motion carries.
Thank you, Chair. There is no business arising from the minutes. We move to the public input period. The public input period is to offer the public an opportunity to comment on any agenda items before the committee considers the item. The public input period procedure policy allows for an allotment of 15 minutes where the speaker is welcome to comment on any items on the agenda up to a maximum of 3 minutes. This excludes items that are or have been subject to a public hearing. The speaker should comment in a polite, calm, and courteous manner using respectful language, civility, and decorum. And I believe we may have one online.
So I can't see on the screen because it's full. We might have someone on page 2. Do we have someone on page 2? Just for the directors and public's awareness, we received a request to participate in public input sort of at the last minute due to the person being unable to attend in person. So consulted with your colleagues in the room, and we thought that even though the individual had missed the deadline as of yesterday, that if we could accommodate them, we would. and we're just looking to see if they've come online yet.
I don't see them online at the time, Chair. We could move to the gallery.
And I would invite anyone in the gallery that would like to provide any input on any matters on today's agenda to come forward. Seeing nobody taking the bait, so to speak. Anyone else like to, we just scan the list of folks online just to be sure that that the person was wanting to get on has that opportunity. We're not seeing anyone. All right, I guess we move on to the next item. Actually, can we hold on for just a moment? I seem to be having an electrical issue with my computer. Everybody hang on for just a moment. Why am I having an issue? I got nothing. I don't know. Sorry about that delay, everyone. Working on a 20% battery, and apparently I'm plugged in, so we'll see how things go. Ms. Boyd, next item on the agenda.
Thank you, Chair. We have no delegations. We move to 6 correspondence. C1, grant and aid request, Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill regarding Cowichan Secondary School. That it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid, Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill, in the amount of $500 be approved to the Cowichan Secondary School for two $250 bursaries for two 2024 graduating students that reside in Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill, to support their future education and training.
Director Wilson, would you like to move that? Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Director Segal. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed, the motion carries. Ms. Boyd.
C2, grant and aid request, Electoral Area E, Cowichan Station, Satlam, Glenora, regarding Cowichan Watershed Society. The recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid, Electoral Area E, Cowichan Station, Satlam, Glenora, in the amount of $3,500 be provided to the Cowichan Watershed Society to support the Phase 1 Signs Program to raise awareness and keep top of mind the Coxsila watershed community water storage issues during low-flow summer months.
Thank you. I turn to Director Nicholson. Moved, seconded by Director Abbott. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. Item C3. Ms. Boyd.
C3, Electoral Area Directors Forum 2024. Before you, it's UBCM. Electoral Areas Forum will be held January 30th and 31st at the Radisson in Vancouver. We're looking for direction on this from the EA directors.
I look to directors. Any comment, discussion? Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. You may recall that at the last meeting, there was, I think Director Abbott brought up the fact that we should start looking at attendance at some of these the meetings. As far as I'm concerned, I think really the only two that we should absolutely attend are the actual UBCM and AVICC. In this particular instance, I'm not sure that this one is of any huge impact to what we do as we go forward. I think most of it can be discussed at UBCM with our other colleagues that we meet there. So I'm not in favour of this particular one being attended, but then again, that's entirely up to the individual director.
Director Deck.
I was looking through the two reports or the two opportunities, and I really feel like our staff is more than capable of giving us the information we need on all those items. So I'm totally comfortable not going to these two seminar or conferences.
Thank you, Director Abbott.
I echo the comments of Directors Wilson and Deck.
Thank you. I'm going to wade in here. I'm going to take a different view from the comments that have been provided so far. This is the electoral area exclusive opportunity for us to learn more about our craft, to enhance our skills and our networking opportunities. This has in previous years been attended by each and every electoral area director, all as a group. It is an invaluable tool. I don't know that I might have missed one in the time that I've been here. I absolutely understand the fiscal pressures that we face as we go through our budgets, but I can tell you it is of a major false economy to think that an opportunity for us to develop our skills, our knowledge base, to improve ourselves individually in the roles that we do. I think it's a huge missed opportunity if we aren't all going and participating. That's my view, but I hear what everyone else is sharing as well. I've got Director Acton and Segal next. So Director Acton, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe I've only attended this one once, and I agree with your comments. It is definitely probably one of the most valuable, especially for sure for meeting like colleagues that are in the same position as us, and it's nice to connect with them. And it really, I think if you're clear on some goals you have and you're sharing them with other electoral area directors there, you can really benefit as a lot more than meeting people in municipalities, et cetera. So I think it's really worthwhile, and it shouldn't be a very expensive trip. And for those who can go, I would say it's worth a couple days for training. And also tends to be a lot of leadership opportunities. And I went at the beginning of my term and found it really useful and would possibly think about going again.
Thank you, Director Acton. I'm going to go to Ms. Miles Wilson, and I was going to ask whether or not we had a person from finance or whether Ms. Miles Wilson will be acting in the finance role. Ms. Miles Wilson, please proceed.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure. I can't see the whole screen right in front of me, but if there is someone on finance, feel free to jump in. But I just took a quick look at the draft budget, and we're looking at, in the conferences and seminars, you have about $9,000 allocated for conferences and seminars. And there's also, I've noticed some other invitations coming in that are not on this agenda, but they will make it to the board. For instance, UBCM has a housing summit coming up, and there's some other things that you might just want to consider saving some of those funds for, depending, it might be a busy year for events, but I know that one for sure.
Thank you. Did I see, there's Ms. Bowens just popped up on the screen. So can you further illuminate the fiscal situation?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Barely.
Okay. I've been having computer issues at home today.
That sounds good.
So yeah, like as Ms. Miles Wilson said, there is a budget that you have for two $500 each conference for each director that can go to that. And that was what you guys had approved, plus the AVICC, UBCM, and FCM conference. So that is what was in your guys' budget for the 2024 draft.
Thank you. Director Segal next.
Thank you. So if I could just clarify a question through to Ms. Bowen. So LGLA is not one of the conferences that we're already budgeted for?
Through the chair to Director Segal, it's not one that has its own little section within the budget. So within the budget, we have, in 250, you have a section where you guys have allowed for two other conferences other than the AVIC, the UBCM, and the FCM. And that's where that one that Ms. Mills Wilson was talking about so it's like 500, so 1,000 each for each director.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to note that in the letter, it does say that it's been scheduled in line with LGLA to save some money in case anybody's going to that conference. I'm away, so I won't be going this year, but I'm very supportive of anybody that wants to go. I've found any of the conferences I went to over the last year so valuable to my work at the table.
Thank you. Director Wilson again.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand that there is a desire for some directors to attend, and I understand that. And as I say, I was speaking purely from a personal point of view that I would not be attending. However, in the past, as you know, we have actually made a provision that perhaps we only send a portion of the directors of the total number of directors, and that to me would probably be a better way to go. Let's say 25-30%, whatever kind of thing. But I do note that there are a lot of other conferences coming up, and we do need to preserve what we've got in those budgets there. So I would be in favor of perhaps limiting the number who can attend this one if they so desire.
Director Martman.
Sorry, it's been a long time since I had to find the unmute button. I guess the question for me is that it's really coming down to each electoral area director to make this decision. I cannot attend due to other circumstances, so I'd be interested in a show of hands if people are comfortable about who will be attending, and I think that maybe give direction from there to staff.
So at this point, we've had two just indicate that they wouldn't, or no, you're the third, that three wouldn't be attending. Oh, I can't read that. Let's do a quick show of hands. Who would be interested in attending? 1, 2, 3. So there's three of us that are interested in attending. So I think that given the quick straw poll, motion to a recommendation of the board to authorize that those directors able and willing to attend be authorized to attend this conference. Moved by Director Segal, seconded by Director McClinton. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. That will go to which board meeting when? Next week? Yes, please. Okay. Next item is Boyd.
Thank you, Chair. C4, the Local Government Leadership Academy 2024 Forum, Empowering Communities, Leading Change Together for Direction, please.
All right. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. Just referring back to the last C3, the one we were just discussing, for the Electoral Area Directors Forum, I think that I can't remember her name now. I think she's looking for topics that we would, and I think we maybe should think about what we would like to have discussed at that forum, because it can be very useful.
Thank you, Director Nicholson. So just recalling when I was in the role as the UBCM electoral area rep, the the conference agenda has pretty much been set at this point, but there will be opportunities, and that's sort of one of the magic aspects and positive aspects of this event is, yes, absolutely come prepared with topical items that would be of interest to your colleagues around the province. So my understanding is they have pretty much decided on the agenda. I think the original call out was from a few months ago. But yeah, that's a valid point, and anything current and topical in our jurisdiction may very well be current and topical in others as well, and you'll find lots of ears wanting to hear about it. So great point. In regards to the LGLA, I've not personally attended the LGLA training. It's over a number of years. It's excellent training. One of our former municipal directors, Director Sebring, participated in the process over the years as a North Cowichan councillor and mayor. It's very well regarded. This is something that I don't think raised to the level of being considered for budget consideration. So I think we could probably go to Ms. Bowen and ask if we've actually expended dollars in this area in the past and whether or not there's funds available now. I've got you, Director Wilson, if we could hear from Ms. Bowen.
Through the chair to Director Morrison, I'm going to have to look into that because I don't have it like right in front of me. So I can get back to you on that.
Fair enough. And just going on recollection, I don't recall any in the last couple of terms, any directors participating in that program. Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just referring back to the actual report on that one, and it does say that LGLA forum is scheduled immediately after the EAD forum. So in this particular case, if I'm reading that correctly, the only additional cost will be to register, which I think was $495 on top of, because you will already be paying for hotels, etc. Is that understanding correctly? One follows on immediately after the other in the same location?
Yeah, I think you've got that right. There's the additional registration and the additional accommodation for the, I think it's an additional 2 days that LGLA runs. But it is immediately following the electoral area forum.
Yeah, and same as before, Mr. Chair, if I may just follow up, that this would be, I would imagine, as three only directors are indicating that we'll be going, then that would be the case in this particular thing as well, unless somebody else wants to go as well.
How about just for laughs and giggles, we do a straw poll as to who might be considering whether or not they'd like to attend this event. If you wanted to go, hand up now. Guess that settles that then. Next item is Boyd.
Thank you, Chair. Moving along to 7, information IN1, Electoral Area A, Millbay Malahide Advisory Planning Commission minutes for January 4th, 2024.
Can we do both?
Yeah, that's omnibus. And Electoral Area E, Cowichan Station, Satlam, Glenora Community Parks Advisory Commission minutes of November 16th, 2023. Both are those for information.
They're both for information. Any discussion on any of those items? For information, great. Ms. Boyd, on to the next.
Right, moving on, 8 reports. R1, report from the Inspector Enforcement Division regarding Zero Carbon Step Code Amendment Bylaw number 4543, 2024.
Mr. Brisky, center of the screen. Welcome. What do you
Hello,
got for
Mr.
us?
Chair. Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you.
Great. So I have an amendment in front of you for the Zero Carbon Step Code. In the report, we had a good look at it, and we're recommending that for a number of reasons it would be more feasible to go to directly to EL4 July 1st, and that bylaw amendment is attached to your report, and the resolution is there if that is good with the committee. So I'm available for any questions.
Any discussion on this item? Director Deck?
Thanks, Mr. Brusky, for your thoughtful consideration of the way forward here. I'm just wondering about EL3. Is that not automatically wrapped up in EL4, or would we have to do something about that first?
Mr. Brisky.
Thank you for the question, Director Deck. So the difference between EL3 and EL4 is the requirement for electrified cooking facilities. So, we anticipate a number of building permit applications coming in this spring, which is typical for the time of the year. The building code is also going to change, so a lot of people try to get in under that bar. And logistically speaking, if we're trying to keep track of all the folks who aren't supposed to be having electrified cooking versus those who are entitled to it, we suspect there's going to be a high level of confusion in the public, and it would be much simpler if we go right to EL4, and that's 100% electrification, and we give the public plenty of notice that that's coming, and we go for that on July 1st.
Any follow-up? Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just wondering how long it takes. I think that sounds very reasonable to me, but I'd like a little more information about how long it is between an application and then the permit. Generally, how long does that take?
Mr. Brisky.
Director Deck, generally, I'd say anywhere between maybe 3 and 4 weeks. I would anticipate that if we were to move forward with just going to EL4 on July 1st, we might, it's hard to predict what's going to happen next year, but let's say if we had a really good year, there might be maybe 30 dwelling units that become unaffected. And I would suggest, in relation to that likely those folks who are preparing to make those 30 or 40 building permit applications probably aren't expecting to be meeting any level of the zero carbon step code when they come through our door.
Thanks very much. And when I was reading through the building code, all 1,667 pages of it, my admiration for you and your colleagues went sky high. So yes, I'd be happy to move forward the July amendment.
I had Director Acton, our Director Nicholson next, but her hand went down. Do you want to participate or contribute something, Director Nicholson?
Yes, actually, I'm curious if we expect there to be so you said there may be about 30 builds between now and July 1st that might be affected. And I'm just wondering if any of these are sort of are they sort of one-offs, or is any of this a larger development that you might expect to be coming in?
Mr. Brisky.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair to you, Director Nicholson. I thought about that, and I do think we're going to be seeing a lot of maybe one-offs. And honestly, with prices where they are, and where there are available places to build in the CVRD right now, I expect that those potentially 30 or 40 dwellings, if that, are going to be widely spread out around the region. The Cowichan Phase 3, Cowichan Bay Phase 3, that's pretty well wrapped up, and we don't expect another phase of Shawnigan Heights and South Shawnigan probably until likely after July 1st, so I don't expect it would be clustered.
Thank you.
Director Deck, would you like to move the recommended resolution?
I move it.
Do we have a seconder? We have a seconder, Director Abbott. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. Just a quick note for those of you that happen to have your email open, we've just been notified that there will be a housing summit coming up on the February 13th and 14th in Vancouver. So I don't know that we've already adopted our agenda, but we should turn our minds to those that may be interested in participating in that event as their extra. Director Wilson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did attend that particular housing comment. I think you did as well last year, and it's probably one of the more I'm trying to search the right word. It's probably one of the more important ones that we should think about attending. It addresses a lot of the problems that we're facing.
I concur, and I think as I suggest that I think we've got a little bit of time to make a decision as to get to there. So if you're check your calendars after the meeting, and we might need to do a email poll to see who's. I don't think I'll be attending this year, but everybody just think about it. We'll discuss it at our next meeting, or maybe bring something forward for the board. Director Deck.
Can you just repeat the date, please?
13th and 14th. That sounds like Valentine's Day.
And Mr. Chair, if I may just interject here.
Sure.
It's possible that at that meeting as well, a lot of the things that we are discussing here will be brought up there and follow on to UBCM afterwards. So I'll be making every effort to attend that one myself as well.
Great, thank you. Ms. Boyd, next item.
Thank you, Chair. We are on R2, report from the Development Services Division regarding application number ALR 22H02135150, Min Road, PID 006242171.
Welcome, Mr. Buck.
Thank you. And if we could advance to the next slide, please. This is an application for a non-farm use ALR application to allow the deposit of fill on property located at 13150 Min Road. The property is located at the intersection of Cameron and Min Road. The land is approximately 3.6 hectares in size. Next slide, please. The purpose of this report is to introduce the application. This application proposes to allow the non-farm use deposit of fill on the subject property. Approximately 0.08 hectares of area is being impacted, which means that the fill placement is over approximately 2% of the property. The owners submit that the purpose of the fill is to improve access to their lands. On screen is a sketch. The map shows in an area orange, sort of to the top left of the screen, where the fill has occurred. The owners have also indicated that there's future plans for farm infrastructure, including a greenhouse. Reason why this application is before the CVRD board is because the fill included some prohibited materials, which the owners submit have been removed. And if this application is forwarded, the ALC compliance and enforcement officer would have to follow up to close off their file. Next slide, please. The staff recommendation is that the application be forwarded to the ALC for a decision. And under other options on the next slide, CVRD board could forward this application to the ALC with comments or recommendations. Some examples are provided in the report. There's also the option to prevent the application from proceeding, which means that it would return to the ALC compliance officer for a decision and follow-up. I'm here for questions, and the owner is also in the room. Thank you.
So we do have the applicant in the room. This was a bit of a head scratcher for me, so now that staff have given us a little further explanation, it makes a little more sense. I turn to committee members. Do you have any questions for staff? After we've posed questions to staff, we'll call the applicant up when they're done. Director Martman.
Thank you, and thank you to staff for this. I'm wondering if you had a chance to look at this property from the perspective of driveways, because that's what the fill was put into, and I know that there is an existing driveway on one side, and also I see in the referrals there's also a mention about permission from Modi having 2 driveways. Can you comment about, is a cart before the horse on this, or about this? And yeah.
Mr. Bucket.
Thank you. Through the chair. I understand from the applicant who is in the room to speak to it that they have applied to the Ministry of Transportation for the driveway permit. If this application was to proceed, that would not supersede that requirement, so they would still have to go through the ALC as well as with the Ministry of Transportation to get those approvals.
Is that all, Director Martman?
And the other question was around, having an existing driveway already, and did staff, is this something staff would have looked at with this type of application, or is it more of just from a visual from an aerial?
Certainly. And through the chair, normally staff wouldn't see an application of this type. Typically, an application like this would go through the Agricultural Land Commission through a notice of intent process. However, when there's prohibited fill or when fill is put down before that notice of intent has been secured, it does come through the board first for a first right of refusal.
Does that conclude your inquiry, Director Martman?
Yeah, yes, for staff, I'd like to have a couple of questions for the applicant.
Perfect. We'll get to that in a few minutes. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I'm just a little confused about where the fill is. Is the fill the hatched area that looks like a driveway, a straight driveway?
Through the chair, yes, the fill is outlined in orange on the map. It is the driveway off of Cameron Road. It also connects through to the house, to the future greenhouse site, and out to Min Road as well.
Thank you.
Director McClinton.
Thank you, Chair. I think my question's been answered, but just to clarify, if there was no prohibited fill, this application would not have come before us?
Through the chair, if there was no prohibited fill and if a notice of intent had been secured through the Agricultural Land Commission, this application would not be before us.
Thank you.
Yeah, after staff explained that, it feels like it's a bit of a whoopsie, got those out of order, and here we are. Any further questions for staff before I ask the applicant if they've got anything to add, or put her up there so that Director Martman can ask a couple of questions? See no further questions from staff. Mr. Buchan, you can have a seat and don't go anywhere though. We have with us Penny Haslam. Welcome. Is there anything you'd like to add to what's been presented by staff?
I'm going to start by saying I'm really nervous speaking in front of people, so. Okay. Just to sort of start it off, my husband and I, and we have 2 daughters, we purchased this farm to create our dream. I grew up on a farm, my husband grew up on a farm, and we want our girls to do the same. We had a neighboring farmer come to essentially mow the fields and reset the land because it had not been worked in numerous years. He wasn't able to access the property. The driveway that does exist that you see on the map, I do have photos, and I know they went through on the application. You could not get a vehicle, a tractor, a mower, anything onto the farm. So the farmer walked it with us. The neighboring farmer walked it with us and found where the gate had essentially in the fence looked like it had been tampered essentially. Our best guess is that that was the access that in the past farmers had used, but like I said, it hadn't been farmed in a lot of years. So we progressed that way, and we cut through the fence and made our way, and that's the straight shot off of Cameron Road, and it can access the top fields and the bottom fields, and that was the initial reason why we chose that location and to proceed. I did email and go back and forth. I phoned the CVRD and I phoned the ALR, asking permission to bring in fill moving forward to make this a more permanent location. And after I spoke with the individuals, I do note their names. Sorry, it'll just take me a second. Sorry. When I spoke with them, they said that the amount of fill we were going to be bringing on wouldn't affect the property size that we had, so it was okay to proceed. Yes, the issue was that the fill we got from a location in South Nanaimo. A dump truck driver brought it on, and another person ran the excavator. So when it was brought to our attention that the fill brought on did have pieces of concrete on it, and that's when the stop work order was given to us. So the gentleman from the ALC, Devin, Mr. Lang, I guess, he walked the property with us, and we were shown the material that was not allowed to be on the farm. So I went back and forth with them, and they came out and saw multiple times, and I had to be in communication with them and produce images of the land, of the fill that we removed from the existing material. And then we had to show proof of a dump slip of it being disposed of properly. So that material was all removed. So here we are. This driveway is crucial to being able to farm this land. It gives us access to the existing barn that is on site. We have horses and we have cows in order to get the trailers on and to get to where the field has, we put all the fencing, my husband and I, in the pouring rain, and the kids out there having a blast. But we have fenced an area where the cattle can be loaded onto the horse trailer and taken off the property or onto the property, as we have sold them and purchased more. So this summer, our girls were able to, we sold the produce off of the land, and we have sold the hay and being able to get the vehicles on and off to sell that. They set up their little fruit stand at the end of the driveway, and they also sold lemonade, and it's become our dream, and we are continuing to try to expand it. And without this driveway to access to future, hopefully put up the greenhouses or whatever that looks like for us, right now, even just at the rate we're at, we could not be able to access the farm the way we are now with this driveway. We did also call Main Roads before we even broke ground. We spoke with them. There was no culverts. There was no reason. They came out and walked the property with my husband. They saw no reason why this was a concern. Now we see that there are a lot more steps involved, and by no way did we do this in a way of creating problems and creating more headache for anybody. We see that now how to move forward and to do things in the future properly. So we have created the application to actually have this driveway. I don't know if that's helpful. Okay.
Well done. I'll go to Director Martman if he still has questions, but I do want to get some clarification from staff as to the way to proceed, because we couldn't really do option one because it says with comments without. Oh yeah, I guess we could without comments, or we can make comment. Director Martman, did you have questions for the applicant?
Yes, and just a note that whenever I start talking, I just have something in front of me that says breathe. So it's okay to just breathe and take a moment, and this isn't something you have to rush into answering or rush through clarifications, because when I look at the property and I understand sort of the process that you went through, and that your intent is to try to farm this in a vision that you have in your mind. And I don't want to try to put my vision of farming into your vision, because it may not align. I do raise cows, though, and I do have an idea of what it takes to mow a field and what it takes to move animals around. And at first glance, I saw the access to the field turning into a driveway and just sort of taking that front field right out of the equation from from my perspective. And I don't want to get into, which is a farmer, he'll have a view of their own land and try to do it. So it's just a comment that, you've pursued this angle, but from the perspective of what we need to do here, I'm quite interested in, you're going to have to find that balance when you go to the ALC, if this moves forward, about the questions that they ask about, does this aid farming activity, or does this detract from the agricultural capability of the property? And that's a question that you and the ALC will have to or they also have to wrestle with. What I'm interested in is some of the referral comments back from staff around the environmental concerns that could be raised with some of the things that might be proposed, and just wanting to get your thoughts on where you're at with that right now. One of them is around potential tree clearing and repairing areas. And have you read the staff report, and have you got different thoughts about what you might be doing with that back field or back area that of trees?
Thank you. Breathe.
Hang on just a sec. I understand the thoroughness in which you're approaching this, but is the line of inquiry that you're making, Director Martman, pertinent to the application before us about fill in the driveway? If you think it is, fine, we'll proceed.
Yeah, it's tangent in a way, but I think because of the referrals are now in front on us in front of the table, it's a question I feel compelled to ask.
The applicant's response to our staff referrals in our staff report. Fair enough. No, it's a little tangential. You're right. I'll turn to Penny and ask if you're comfortable in responding.
Okay, thank you. To speak again, just a bit of the positioning. Min Road, the road that is where the existing driveway is, it's a single lane road at best. An old-time farmer neighbor described it to us is that there was no access to the properties down in the back. So a long time ago, they went and said, we need access to our properties, and they said, well, we'll give you the minimum allowance. And so that's why they named it Min Road. So there is no way of getting to the lower fields. So we have now set it up the way the barn is. On the one side of the driveway is where the horses are, and on the left side is where the cows are. In our mind, that is why we chose it that way. It kind of keeps our farm divided in a way. As for the trees, we are now farm status. In the beginning, when we first bought the property, it had farm status. A bit of background on that is we bought the property and then we started to reno the house. We also sold our existing home that we lived in, so we were a bit homeless. The gentleman we bought it from also had passed away, so we had no access to keys and those sort of things. It was a different type of sale. So we didn't have access to the mailboxes in the beginning. We also were sort of juggling animals in two different locations, along with kids and pets and living out of vacation rental by owner homes. When we took possession in September, we didn't actually move in until April. So in that time frame, we didn't get the letters asking for the paperwork to continue the farm status, so we lost it that first year. We then produced everything showing what we had done, and we now have it again. We know that with the farming, there is the creek on the property. The ALC gentleman that I spoke with, Mr. Lang, when he walked it with me, he thought potentially taking down some of the trees would allow for more field space, which would make up for the property that we lost in the driveway. So that's my thoughts on that.
Director Bartman?
Thank you. And I think the other one is a question around, I think there was concerns around parking of logging trucks and that this is just going to be conducive to that. And I gather from what I read in the meeting, in the material here, is that yes, there may be logging trucks there, but they are just basically an overnight thing if you have people visiting. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. We do own a logging company. My husband drives trucks, but we have two sites. At the time when I created the application, we had one in Parksville, which is our home base. That's where the shop is. That's where all logging trucks are parked and maintained. We also now have a second yard we rent off of Teal Jones Sort down at Duke Point Sort. So we have two locations where our drivers go. My husband does bring a logging truck home at night from time to time, depending on where his day ends. Sometimes he ends at Parksville, so he parks there and then he drives the vehicle home. He has a work crummy. Other times he comes back through Lake Cowichan Way, and it's just easier to park at home rather than going all the way back to Northwest Bay.
Fantastic. It's not a marshalling yard. Perfect. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I was very curious about the tree clearing as well, and I thought Mr. Lawrence did a very good job on his referral, and I would encourage you to read that carefully, because when you cut down trees, we're facing significant water issues in our region now, particularly in areas like this area, and I think that anything that you do as far as land clearing now has an impact on the watershed that you're living within. So it's not just your property that you're affecting, it's everyone else's as well from a water perspective. So I do encourage you to read Mr. Lawrence's referral notes. Thanks.
Director McClinton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a few comments. First, just want to say congratulations. I thought your presentation was very well done, and just want to wish you good luck with fulfilling, your dreams. That's pretty exciting. And if there's no other questions, I'm comfortable moving forward the recommendation.
So that brings us to that question of, we have option one, which is without comments or recommendations, which I believe could be, it be referred, without. We've got option two that is requesting that the comments or recommendations, but with specifics. I don't know if the examples listed in as A, B, and C were specific to this application. Perhaps Mr. Buchan could clarify that for us. Mr. Buchan, please.
Thank you. Through the chair, option two, the examples are ones that could be specific to this application if the board feels that they are appropriate. The option to simply forward without comments and recommendations is not a negative. It means it just goes to the ALC for a decision. Whereas if we feel that there's other compelling comments or recommendations to make, option two would be appropriate.
We can also forward the application with a recommendation to approve.
Correct, yes.
That simply like that as well. I'm seeing this is an Area H application, and, Director Wilson, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And just for a clarification.
You went silent on us. Director Wilson, you went silent on us. Can't hear a word you're saying.
Hello? Oh, you're back again.
You're back again.
Okay.
Take her from the top.
For instance, option two with the recommendation that it move forward, I'm seeking guidance here. I would like to see this one go forward, and that's not any reflection on Director Martman, of course, and what he wants to see. But from what I can make out, this young family who wants to start farming, carry it on, which we need. So I'm looking for the best way forward, and I don't want to put you on the spot, Mr. Buchan. Honestly, I don't.
That's quite all right. Through the chair, it could be as simple as A, B, and C in option two are examples. It could be that the board wishes to simply say, move it with a recommendation of approval.
Director Martman, what's your pleasure?
Thank you. I actually think staff have done a good job on this, and I would move the staff recommendation.
Okay, let me just get clarification here. Sorry. Recommended resolution. Yeah, and that's what I was seeking clarification. Do you want the resolution to read what's in the recommended resolution with recommendation to approve, no comment, recommended specific resolutions, that's where the clarification, if you're recommending the recommended resolution, do you want it to proceed as written?
Yeah, yes, I would, and I can comment if necessary, but yes, as written, and I think it's in the ALC's mandate to look at the impact on farming and whether it's appropriate, and that's where I started off with saying is the ALC's decision between balancing what is on page 4 of our report between number 1, is this will this aid farming activity, or 2, will it impact the agricultural capability? That's an ALC decision. We don't have the expertise or the staff to provide information on that. And so, from my perspective, I thank the applicant for coming, and but I think staff have got the right nuance on this.
You're moving that. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Director Abbott. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? One opposed. Motion carries. That will go through to the next meeting a week hence. Which, what date? 24th. Next item, Ms. Boyd, do we want to take a minute, or how are we doing? Here's our agenda. We are at R3. This one could take a moment. Let's take 10 minutes, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. Unless you're eating, turn your camera on. Ms. Boyd.
R3, report from the Development Services Division regarding application number RZ23I03-8976, Yubo Road, PID 009575103.
Who's presenting this one?
I will present this application.
Ms. Suderman, you're very faint. Could you speak up a little bit?
Okay, I will try.
That sounds
Is
much
that better?
Yep.
Okay. So yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. The purpose of today's report is to introduce a new rezoning application, RZ23I03 at 8976 Yubo Road, and request permission to proceed with external referrals to gather additional perspectives on the proposal. Mr. Max Russell, who is the applicant, is on the call today in case the committee has any questions. The location of the proposal is on Yubo Road in Area I, approximately 1 kilometer west of the Meads Creek Industrial Park. The property itself is formerly part of the rail line, and it parallels Yubo Road. And as you can see, it's a rather unusually shaped property. Next slide, please. There's a mix of policy. So as you can see, the property is already split zoned between forestry and I-4 zoning. There's a mix of policy direction with regard to this application in the official community plan. The key concern internally at this point is the continuance of split zoning on this property. Split zoning is something that the official community plan discourages. And we also need to learn the concerns of other jurisdictions as well as the Area I Advisory Planning Commission prior to making a formal recommendation to the committee as to whether or not this application should proceed. So the proposed layout there of the expanded business area, you can see some of the challenges without having a surveyed image of the property. But this is essentially what the applicant is proposing to do, but it's not to scale. So what you can see there on the left-hand side is the vegetative buffer and the berm, and then the parking spaces for proposed RVs, and then the entrance shed and so on. Next slide, please. So the recommendation is that it be referred to external agencies as listed in the recommendation. The committee also has other options, of course, which are to request further information about the application before it is circulated for referrals, or to deny the application at this point.
Thank you, Ms. Suderman. And just so I can sort of settle on a language, I was talking with Ms. Chirolf the other day. This is what staff are referring to as a preliminary report? Is that the?
That is correct.
Agreed upon terminology? So I've been calling them all sorts of things, but this is just the first blush, first crack at the report as presented. So with that, any questions for staff? Director Deck.
So is this not the time then to discuss internal referrals or get a request for opinions from neighboring residents? It's just, I'm just wondering how the timeline works, because it's an introduction, so I'm not sure just what the timeline, how this rolls out, the procedure.
Ms. Suderman.
Thank you very much for the question. Through the chair to Director Deck. This is new to me. Also, it's a new procedure to have this preliminary report come to the committee asking for permission to send the application out to external agencies for review. So once we have, my understanding of the process is that once that step has been done and the referral responses are received, then an application can be considered in its entirety based on full information, and a full report can come to the committee at that time. And then it would proceed through the normal process. If the idea was to move forward to bylaws, then it would go ahead, and then there would be a public hearing and so on and so forth. Yes, there will be a time in the process when neighboring properties will be contacted directly and ask for their opinions about this, but we're not there at this time. That would come closer to the end of the process.
Just before you go to your follow-up, and in discussions with Ms. Chirolf, and if the director and the committee was interested in a public information meeting, for instance, it would be preferable to ensure that the referrals were actually done and there was a more complete application that could be presented to the public in a public information meeting, and that would be subsequent to the actions being recommended here. Go to Director Deck for a follow-up, but I've got Director Nicholson on the list. Director Deck.
That's great clarification. I was thinking so too. It's important to get all those outside ones in for our information, but as well more fulsome rather information from neighbors and others. So and staff. So yes. Now let's just see if I've got anything else here. So about waste. Solid waste, should there be bins and so on there already, or is this, it's just a recommendation to have them there, but it's the service is not in place at this moment, but it's mandated? How does that work?
Ms. Suderman.
That is a very good question. Thank you. The answer is that I don't know at this point. I'm guessing, I could guess at what the answer would be. My thought in taking that commentary from the division, the Waste Management Division, is that should this application proceed for the expansion, that it would be a requirement of the expansion that they be signed up for the full waste management package,
Thank you.
whatever is appropriate. Yeah.
Thank you.
I see Ms. Churl with her hand up, and I'm thinking I got something wrong there in what I said a few minutes ago. So, Ms. Churl, correct me if you will, or provide us with some new information.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I don't need to correct you. I wanted to highlight that the purpose of having the preliminary report come forward is so that the committee has the opportunity to either accelerate the process to drive something directly to board for decision, or to give you more time on the other end to make sure that you have a complete information. It gives you an opportunity to ask questions, to request further information. And then once you go out to referral, inevitably there will be discussion and comments that come back that might trigger the need for additional information, or might trigger the desire of the committee to recommend or direct that a community information meeting be held. So it's very early in the process, so nobody should feel sort of pressured to, I think in this case, sort of have to expedite this application. There's an opportunity to ask lots of questions and get the information that you need in order to make the appropriate decisions. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, Ms. Churl. And just keep in mind, we've got questions for staff at this point, and the applicant is here if they want to add anything further to what's been presented already. Director Nicholson, or did you want to wave off?
No, I would like to ask some questions. This application, I recall that we had this application maybe 1 or 2 terms ago. And I wish my memory was better. I cannot remember why it was turned down at the time. And it seems to me that it has something to do with, or in my mind, one of the important things is that it's a long strip along the road. And granted, an awkward piece of property to make use of, but at the same time, it is an important visual corridor, I think, for people going into Yubo. And I guess I would ask Ms. Suderman, I get the split zoning issue, but that didn't seem to come out in your report as very problematic. And I'm wondering that if I recall, the opportunity to buffer, because the lot is so narrow, is not very good. And I granted the lot itself isn't in that great shape anyway, from a visual perspective. But yeah, I'd just like your comments on that.
Ms. Suderman.
Thank you very much for the question to Director Nicholson through the chair. The history of this particular property with regard to rezonings is that it came up. The original I-4 zoning was adopted for the property in 2016 after an application that was submitted in 2014. Subsequently, there was another application that was submitted in 2018 related to the storage of heavy equipment on site.
All right. Okay.
That application never went to bylaw stage. It withdrew. It got withdrawn at a certain point. My understanding from reading the file is due to community concerns about it. This current application is to extend the current use of the property, part of the property, to a larger part of the property, expand the amount of RV parking that's available on the property. I would like to say that there is screening on the existing part of the property that has RVs on it, and it is screened from the road, so that even though the trees are relatively young, the cedar trees there are they're tall enough now and so on that they create a screen for drivers going by. So visually it doesn't impair. The applicant has committed to doing something similar along the property line again for this part of the property should the rezoning be granted.
Do you have a second question, Director Nicholson?
No.
Ms.
Mr. Chair,
Pressler.
I just also have a follow-up. I just wanted to point out through you to Director Nicholson that it is also noted in the staff report that this rezoning, if it were to proceed, would also be subject to an OCP amendment, which would also require it to be added to the industrial development permit area. So a development permit for the form and character, including landscaping, would be required for the development of this.
Director Deck?
So I'm just wondering about the increased number of vehicles that will be on this property. It's proposed to go from, I think, 50 to, what, triple that is my recollection? Sorry, I should have had it written down.
Well, there would be 80 new spots, I believe. So that would be to 130. So
130,
it's a little bit over double, yeah.
Okay, sorry. But I guess what concerns me about that is that, you know, vehicles have a tendency to leak, and directly underneath this property is our aquifer. And so I'm troubled by that, and it was pointed out in the staff referrals. So, yeah, so I'd like to know lots more about the protection of the aquifer there. Thank you.
Seeing no further hands in the room or on screen, I would invite the applicant, Mr. Russell. Is there anything further you would like to add or to what staff has already provided to directors? Mr. Russell.
Hello.
Welcome.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, I'm having some IT problems here. I'd like to thank the board and the staff for addressing this issue today. As far as the last comment on environment, we've run this yard since 2016, the existing yard. I'm very diligent on the vehicles that I allow in the yard. It's our property. I don't want leaks. I've had one incident where a vehicle come in and we put a pad under it and asked the person renting the space to remove the vehicle right away. So environmentally, we're going to be very diligent on that. As far as more traffic, with what we have there now, very seldom do I see any more than 2 people in our yard at a time. We've had no issues with coming in and out of the property. And in fact, with this proposal, we've moved the entrance gate down further, which we addressed when we originally put the first yard in. And vehicles coming off Yubo Road will be completely off the road when they hit the gate. So I fail to see if there's going to be any problems with that. When we put that driveway in back in 2016, we worked with Highways, and that was a recommendation they gave us at that time, was to increase the depth of the driveway, which we did. Any other questions? I'm open to answer them for you. Oh, regarding the split zoning, east coming up Yubo Road, there's about 1,000 feet of that, which is we consider our residential area. Halfway up that is a fence across behind our house, which is a 12-foot livestock fence. And from there to the creek, we haven't touched. We go up once in a while to take dead trees out for firewood, and that's it. The reason for that is that that's quite a corridor that's used by wildlife, including elk, deer, bear, even the odd cougar runs up and down Meads Creek. So what we're looking at is, and we brought this up in 2016 when we did the development, was that we are not going to be the owners of the property forever. And we want to leave this part of the property as residential to protect that corridor. I guess that's about all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. I turn to directors on screen or in the room. I see no question. Oh. Perfect. So thank you, Mr. Russell. We'll put this in the hands of the committee now. I turn to the director for the area. What's your pleasure?
Well, I think we need lots and lots of information, and I think it should start with all the referrals to outside agencies, so I'd move that.
Move the staff recommendation. And do we have a seconder? We have a seconder. Would you read the recommendation, please?
Thank you, Chair. Wait. That it be recommended to the board that application number RZ23I03 8976 Yubo Road PID 009575103 be referred to the following external agencies and First Nations: Electoral Area I, Yubo Mead Creek Advisory Planning Commission, Subasek, Lake Cowichan First Nation, Cowichan Tribes, Town of Lake Cowichan, Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations, Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, Island Health, Cowichan Lake Fire Services, and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this item? See no one on screen, no one in the room. Call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. That recommendation will go to the board on the 24th. Thank you, Mr. Russell. Ms. Boyd.
Thank you very much.
Item.
Thank you, Chair. R4, report from the Development Services Division regarding temporary use permits. That'd be recommended to the board that staff prepare amendments. Sorry, I'm stealing your thunder.
Thank you. And if we could advance to the next slide, please. The purpose of this report is to provide an overview of the authority for the CVRD to issue temporary use permits, or as we call them in planning, TUPs. Next slide, please. Temporary use permits are a discretionary tool that local governments may use to allow for a use that is not permitted by a zoning bylaw. This permission is on a temporary basis, up to 3 years, with a possibility of renewal once to a maximum of 6 years, although a board can certainly issue a TUP for a shorter time frame. Local governments can choose to establish broad policies to allow for the elected board to consider a wide range of temporary use proposals, or they may intentionally limit the types of permits they will consider and or the types of conditions that they might attach to a TUP. Some local governments have elected to designate the entirety of their land base as areas where TUPs can be considered. The CVRD has not taken this approach. Appendix A to the staff report illustrates the types of uses that the board can presently consider under the current policy framework. Some electoral areas have only a few parcels that are designated for TUPs. Others may show a large majority of the land designated for TUPs. However, the local area plan policies further limit which of the mapped parcels can be considered for the purpose of a temporary use. Next slide. If desired, the CVRD board could amend its bylaws and apply a broader approach to allowing the board to consider applications across the region's electoral areas. This could provide the board with more flexibility and the ability to issue TUPs at its discretion for a variety of uses. General guidelines, such as limiting the times of operation, dealing with water and sewage, could be created. Further, there could be specific guidelines for specific types of temporary use permits. I have examples from other local governments. It's a random sampling, so if we can advance to the next slide. The first example, CVRD occasionally receives requests to allow for temporary accommodations in RVs. Some local governments, such as the village of Valemount, have used TUPs to approach this and can deal with things such as the location of the RVs, winterizing plans for water connections, sewage, power, and so on. Next slide, please. Given the current housing challenges and the long-term housing shortage, some local governments have also used TUPs to provide temporary housing, either in shelter or modular facilities. The City of Duncan, for example, has used this to allow for a temporary housing in modular structures, and a comparable approach was taken by the City of Victoria. Next slide, please. Some communities have also used TUPs to help regulate short-term vacation rentals. This could also be allowed on ALR land for properties that meet the ALR use regulation to allow for agritourism. Some of the communities that do this consider things like on-site water, sewage disposal, fencing and screening, and so on. Next slide, please. Campgrounds are also subject to TUPs in some jurisdictions. The CVRD has a campsite standards bylaw which regulates the designs of campsites and requires service buildings, permanent facilities such as washrooms and laundry facilities, depending on the scale. In theory, a TUP could be issued in a manner that permits a campsite without some of these on a trial period. One of the examples on screen is the Fraser Valley Regional District, which did just this to allow for a temporary campsite to use as a case study as they were reviewing one of their zones. Next slide, please. TUPs can also be used for the establishment of temporary commercial or industrial businesses. On screen are a few examples, some from the City of Colwood, where they used land that was slated for future development, so it was a temporary use before development occurred. Others, such as in Langford, allowed for the conversion of a residential building to a more industrial commercial facility, and hours of operation were limited to help deal with potential impacts to neighbors. Next slide, please. Temporary use permits can also be used during construction, such as allowing the establishment of construction offices or home sale centers. Again, examples from Langford and Surrey. Surrey, they used a bond to help ensure that these offices were removed upon completion of construction. Next slide, please. Work camps are also an example of using TUPs. Up north, they've been used for work camps associated with major infrastructure projects. Also on the mainland in the Squamish-Lillooet Regional Districts. These are something that we don't see a whole lot of here. I don't think we've seen any, and our policies presently don't consider this except for in conjunction with a logging camp. Next slide, please. Markets and festivals are also an example of where a TUP could be used. One could imagine a scenario where a society might be interested in hosting an event and wants to have a TUP prior to going through a rezoning process to demonstrate impacts to the community. The example on screen is a temporary market area that included farmers markets, playground facilities, outdoor adventure tours, associated rentals, and more. Next slide, please. The recommendation before you today is that the CVRD bylaws be amended to apply a broader approach to allowing TUPs across the region. As the second part of this recommendation is for staff to bring forward TUP guidelines, including specific guidelines for temporary housing. If approved, the board would continue to have full discretion to issue TUPs with conditions, or deny TUPs. At present, if someone brings forward a TUP proposal that the board generally supports, however, if it's not consistent with the current policy, the only options are to either deny or to place it on hold and amend the official community plan and local area plan. Next slide, please. If the CVRD board is not interested in considering the recommendation, this report can simply be received for information. I'm here for questions if you have them, and there's also people online who might be able to help.
Thank you, Mr. Buchan. That was interesting and informative, and I would go to committee. I've got a couple of questions. I'll go to Director Nicholson first with her hand up. Go ahead, Director Nicholson.
Thank you very much. I just wondered, the legislation reads that you can apply for a temporary use permit and then have it renewed once after 3 years, and then you have to, and then after that, people tend to apply again. So often what is supposed to be temporary actually becomes fairly permanent. Is it possible for local governments to add extra constraints on legislation?
Mr. Buchan.
Through the chair, that could be one of the guidelines that we consider. To your point, yes, right now you can apply for one temporary use permit and renew that permit once. nothing stops someone from applying for a consecutive temporary use permit after that first one is renewed and expired. One of our guidelines could be that after a TUP has been renewed once, no further TUPs will be issued. There could be some scenarios where the board may wish to have that flexibility to consider an additional TUP. This was used for cannabis retail when it first came out in a number of communities, so that the cannabis facilities did not get a legal non-conforming status if it didn't work out in the community, just for example.
Follow up?
Yeah, to follow up, a lot of your examples were focused on the housing crisis that we're in, and this seems like a possible tool to help with that. What I'm wondering about, though, is the bylaw enforcement. If you start down the road of temporary use permits for living in RVs and so forth, what are the implications for bylaw enforcement when the temporary use permit runs out?
Through the chair.
Go ahead.
If the board is interested in having staff look at options, we'd certainly consult with our colleagues in bylaw enforcement and building. In terms of high-level comments, there could be guidelines around requiring security deposits to ensure that when permits expire, there is a fund to draw from to help with enforcement costs.
Thank you.
Director Segal.
Thank you. Excellent report. Thank you. I really love the idea of having flexibility for a lot of these examples you provided. My question is, I feel like you said it and I missed it, but do all TUPs come to the board, or are there some that staff have the authority to approve?
Mr. Bucket.
Through the chair, that is a decision of the board. Most places will make this a decision of the board. There's a few examples that we can point to where the board has delegated the, not the reissuance, the extension of a temporary use permit to staff in some circumstances, but that's a matter that the board could consider, and many boards like to have that decision on their own.
Director
Okay.
Segal, follow up? You're good?
Yeah, I guess just a comment that I can foresee a large number potentially coming through, but we'll talk more about it.
Thank you. I've got myself, Director Martman, and Director Wilson, so I'm going to just insert myself here and pose a couple of questions here. Firstly, I'm actually had a change of heart over the last number of years due to a lot of the bylaw enforcement and the rigidity of our zoning that is so restrictive, and in some senses that's been good, but I know that my APC has always been mindful of being flexible to different scenarios and situations, and so I'm coming around to this almost enthusiastically now, but there's a couple of things that I want to ensure, and it looks like we're early enough that staff can take these comments away and incorporate them. Is this a electoral area specific only decision, not only at committee, obviously, but at the board? Is this solely electoral area jurisdiction on the TUPs? That's my first question.
Through the chair, once policies have been established, those become a land use decision, much like rezoning, much like variances. I would have to look further into it to see if the changes would be strictly electoral area, but I'm happy to bring that forward if you decide to ask us to investigate this further.
I would like that to be investigated further. Also, one area that it may seem odd, but it's in change of ownership. I can imagine very easily someone engaging in an activity. They've received the appropriate temporary use permit. They run the course of even a renewal, and then sell the property, and there's this implied use that goes with the property, yet it may run out in a year. is there a set of best practices, standard operating procedures in dealing with that sort of scenario?
Thank you for the question. I'm not aware of the best practices because we haven't gone further into investigating the options. I know that some places have rather lengthy conditions to try and deal with some of those things. I'd also have to look at whether or not there's a notice of temporary use that gets registered on title, but that could be an option as well.
Thank you for that. I'll go to Director Martman next. Oh, hang on. Ms. Gerolf, please insert yourself here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I just wanted to clarify and confirm that issuance of a temporary use permit would be the exclusive authority of the electoral area directors voting at the board. So electoral area vote only. There may be, depending on the use that's proposed, other approvals that are required from other agencies, such as water licensing, et cetera. But the decision of the land use decision would be yours.
Thank you for confirming that. Director Martman.
Thank you, Chair. And it's interesting, how many permits have we done over the last 5 years? I can't seem to recall more than, I don't know if I even recall one. That's one question.
Mr. Buchan or Ms. Gerolf?
I could probably respond to that more easily than Mr. Buchan. So there haven't been very many TUPs that have been considered because the ability to obtain a TUP is very limited in electoral areas. I recall an application for one commercial TUP in electoral area D. And then there have been perhaps one in electoral area E. But very limited. Yeah.
And a follow-up, if I may. So will you take into consideration what the expected workload then? Because it sounds very appealing, I think, from the examples given from a housing perspective. And will the process be, rigorous enough to ensure that the neighborhood are taken into consideration? I'm sure it all is, but it just seems like the work could ramp up. And what's your thoughts on that?
Mr. Buchan or Ms. Gerolf?
Go ahead, Richard.
All right, thank you. In terms of workload, it's hard for me to comment on that, so Mr. Rolfe might have some additional insight. One thing I would point out is that because TUPs are not an option today in most circumstances, people are looking at rezoning and potentially OCP amendments rather than a TUP, and those do take a considerable amount of resources, so it's not necessarily none today and new tomorrow. And Mr. Rolfe might have some additional comments on that.
Ms. Gerolf.
Thank you. So I would say that this is the very beginning of a conversation about this particular topic at committee. And so if you direct staff to go and do some work on this, we would come back with some potentially some proposed guidelines, but also some more information about the types of uses that have been considered in the past, the types of requests that we've had from residents in the past, and it could be that you focus on specific types of things in a temporary use permit framework, and that might be housing or accessory commercial uses. I mean, there can be a very limited stream of uses that's considered. There's a spectrum that could be considered. So I think it's important to have a conversation about that. We do have, there are uses that I can think of that, could be dealt with appropriately via TUP. And so one would be occupancy of an RV during the construction of a home, right? And typically our zoning bylaws will deal with that, but it's not really a great way to deal with that type of use because it is temporary, right? So there are some things like that we can bring back more information on to provide maybe some more context locally.
Thank you, Ms. Gerolf. I had Director Wilson, followed by Abbott. Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Buchan, would you mind on your presentation there? I think it may have been the second page where it talks about blanket conditions. There was the CVRD present one, and then there was a blank one right next door. A blanket right next door to it. That's the one. That's the one. Thank you very much. Now, to me, this fits in nicely with the present HOCP and MOCP things that are going on at the moment with Miss Breen and Miss Garnett, because we're now looking at a uniform approach to everything here. This is a very good slide. I like this one a lot, and it does bring uniformity to everybody. We're not saying, well, you can do it in C, but you can't do it in D or B because of this, that, and the other. So I see this as a great move forward. Thank you very much, Mr. Buchan.
Director Abbott.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, staff, for bringing this forth. I'm not sure if, I just would like to add emphasis that increasingly short-term rentals are becoming a hot button issue in probably most areas. And while my own personal opinion is that we should curtail them, I'm being persuaded by residents in Area D that they are performing a service. They're adding to a lack of vacation stock or temporary places for people to. We don't have too many hotel rooms left in the area. I'm hoping, and this is more just adding emphasis, I'm hoping that STRs, the use of RVs can be vociferously discussed around this table, because it's happening. It's happening whether we like it or not. I only just learned before the end of the year that short-term rentals aren't permitted in the CVRD, and yet we all know they exist. And I think we'd better align ourselves that since they do exist, let's have them perhaps under a TUP, and they can be monitored, because I'm getting called out in the early evening to go and intervene, or asked what can be done about people having large parties.
Director Abbott, I hear where you're going, but we're talking about temporary use permits, not short-term rentals at this point. It may fall under that, but I hear you, and we should stick to the report at hand. Sorry about that. Before I go to Director Nicholson, this is something that I think needs to be dealt with a sense of urgency. And I'd look to my colleagues, not only in the room and at home. It seems like we've given staff a whole bunch of really good ideas, and they're going to go back and listen to all of the great ideas that we've suggested. Is there any merit in there being like, I'm not saying an all-day workshop, but perhaps a workshop in advance of an Electoral Area Services Committee meeting, just to suss out a number of the areas of concern that directors have? There's short-term rentals, there's construction in advance, there's the housing issue, there's any number of issues, and if we're going to go down this road, I'd like to make sure that we do this well, and that we get it right out of the gate, sort of thing. So I see Ms. Suderman has put up her hand. I was hoping Ms. Schroelf might jump in. Ms. Suderman, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm just putting on a different hat right now, Chair Morrison. I'm now in the Economic Development Division, working on the workforce housing strategy. So yes, this is one of the things we want to consult with the committee members about in great detail. This particular item anticipates one of the recommendations that's going to be coming forward out of the workforce housing strategy. So the timing is perfect from that point of view. And we do need to look at how short-term rentals, temporary use permits, and all of these things might be able to help with various types of measures to address workforce housing needs, which are urgent, as you've said.
Thank you for that. Are you leaning in to say something, Ms. Schroelf, or?
Well, you've invited me to speak, so I'll take that opportunity. Should the committee want to have more of a dedicated session on the topic of temporary use permits, staff was certainly happy to arrange that, and so we would just look for a committee resolution, and perhaps with some specificity around the topic.
Easy for you to say. Okay, that's excellent. I think, have we had Director Nicholson and Wilson, have you spoken already? Because we have Director Segal as a first timer, I think. Director Segal, go ahead. You got the floor.
Oh, thank you. I was just going to say that I think Mr. Buchan has done a really thorough report and flesh out of options. I really look forward to seeing what he'd bring back. So I don't know that we need a workshop. I really think we have great staff on this. I don't know if, Director Wilson or Nicholson still have questions. I'm happy to make a motion if we're there.
Well, their hands are still up, so why don't I go to them and I'll come back to you. Director Nicholson, go ahead.
Thank you. So I agree with Director Wilson. It would be really important to get a consistent approach across the electoral areas. And I noted that Ms. Cheryl said that you could work through this carefully and provide a more limited use of temporary use permits, depending on what it was you wanted to achieve. And I think that's a really important thing to do because I've had some experience with temporary use permits in Area E, and I can tell you that I am not keen on them for a number of reasons. I started out my first term, there was a very, very contentious temporary use permit to do with camping and Rock of the Woods on the Cowichan River. And it really split the community, and it created a lot of work, I thought. It really, to me, ended up speaking to the fact that we have these zones, we have neighborhoods with expectations. We really need to be.
Oh, we're back again. Okay.
We really need to be careful that we aren't going to be creating issues, environmental or density issues or whatever, by using temporary use permits in an inappropriate area, location. And that is very specific to the geography, not necessarily the zone. So I think we really need to think this one through carefully.
Director Wilson? Okay, so we have a recommendation before us. I don't see any further hands. Director Deck's microphone is on. Okay. You know, I'm hearing what's being shared around the room is I think there's some enthusiasm to ensure that we pursue this, but we pursue it carefully and we make sure that we're, you know, not opening the floodgates, but making sure that opportunities can be capitalized on. And so I think that it would be a responsible thing for us to consider meeting for a couple of hours with staff and sort of workshopping this to an extent that we discuss what some of the limits might be and what some of the opportunities might be. I just view that the fact that we're making a sort of a general recommendation. We're asking staff to review the list of items. I don't know everything that's been discussed or recommended or supported in just our discussion, but I think that we should take some time and put some effort into defining what we're sending staff away to work on. So I think we can certainly pass the recommendation and look at a subsequent resolution as to whether we have a workshop or not. So I see Ms. Sherolf's hand up, and then I'll go to Director Nicholson afterwards. Ms. Sherolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to confirm that if there is a resolution passed to hold a session to talk about the issue, and the types of uses that may or may not be appropriate for TUPs, it would constitute furthering your business, and you need to do that as a special EASC.
Understood. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I would be very interested in the Advisory Planning Commission's take on this too at some point towards the beginning of the process.
Well, that was another question I was going to ask of staff as to where do you see the going out to the APCs in this process? Mr. Buchan.
Thank you. There's a variety of options that we could use to engage the APC. That could be early in the process. That could be after staff has developed some starting point, discussion points for potential guidelines to get feedback. Some of my colleagues may have some other thoughts on that as well.
Any of Mr. Buchan's colleagues have any thoughts on that? Mr. Rolfe, you're on the screen again.
Yeah, I'll echo that, and I would say that typically when we go out to APCs, it's nice to be able to provide something that they can comment on. So my recommendation would be that EASC is amenable, that staff would go back, do some work, come back to you, and then at that point have consideration for potential consultation with APCs or other stakeholders.
Thank you. I think that sort of fits with the timeline I'm thinking of as well, and it gives us something to focus on, and if we get a first crack at it before we ultimately send it out for consultation of the APCs, that would make some sense. Director McClinton.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to throw my comments in. I'm in full agreement with Director Segal. I think any temporary use permit that would come before us, if this new legislation is put forward, we're going to have the opportunity to deal with these as a case by case basis. I mean, let's get these tools in our hands and then figure out how to use them appropriately. My bigger concern is, sometimes things can tend to get held up at the board. And just further to Director Segal's point, I think that, with the report that comes forward, let's just be prepared to have a fulsome discussion when that new report comes forward at the next meeting. I don't know if a workshop is needed, because I think the subsequent discussions that'll come out of each temporary use permit, that will more than suffice. We'll be dealing with those on a case-by-case basis. So that's the way I'm leaning. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Director McClinton. And I'm going to suggest that the words of Director Nicholson a few moments ago about contentious TUP and her neck of the woods it was contentious, took a lot of staff resources, was quite divisive, and took a lot of time of the committee and staff. And so my word of caution is, let's kind of do this one, get this one right going out the door, as opposed to trying to tweak and adjust as we go along. So we've got a resolution on the floor. I'll go to Director Nicholson again, and then perhaps we can consider the resolution. Director Nicholson, go ahead. You're muted.
Just with respect to the point you just made, if I recall, the temporary use permit that was so problematic for me was the whole board decided on that. It was not just an electoral area decision. So I would like clarification on that, because it does, the dynamic changes a lot when the whole board is making decisions for an electoral area.
Ms. Chirelf, I don't recall the whole board decided on that one, but go ahead, Ms. Chirelf. Clarification.
Mr. Chair, I don't think I was present when that application came forward, but I'm wondering if it was possible that the special events bylaw applied, and that might have triggered an all board consideration potentially. I mean, the legislation's really clear about temporary use permits, or it's a planning matter, so it would be the vote of the EA directors.
And just further to contentious issues, I had one in my electoral area that was very contentious, was wedding venue application, and it was not a pleasant experience. So, I'm urging a great deal of caution. Director Segal.
If I'm not mistaken, I don't think there's a motion on the floor, so I would move option one, unless I missed it.
Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. Is there a director interested in putting forward the notion of a special TUP, special EASC TUP meeting?
I so move.
Moved by Director Abbott, seconded by Director Nicholson. Any further discussion on that item? Director Segal.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to support this because I think if it has to happen in an open EASC, it can just be on a regular agenda. We can dedicate as many hours as needed. And if it so happens we have so many reports, we need to add a second one at that time. That's great. But I think all of our time is valuable, and I don't want to add an extra meeting that we don't necessarily need. But happy to have as much conversation as needed on this item.
Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I echo what Director Segal has said there. Let's not beat about the bush. Let the staff do what they've done. Mr. Buchan has done a great job so far, and I'm quite happy to discuss this not in a special meeting. Thank you.
Director Nicholson.
Thank you. So we have just passed a resolution to enable sort of a draft amendment, draft bylaw to be produced. So I don't understand when we're going to have the discussion about what kind of things we think temporary use permits should apply to and what they shouldn't. Because I really just don't think we should have a blanket anything or anything goes. I think that we're just opening up the floodgates. So maybe Mr. Buchan has taken something from this conversation that he can use. I don't know.
Mr. Buchan, do you want to take a stab at that?
I thank you through the chair. I've taken a lot of notes about some of the items that I'm hearing, so I'm planning to bring forward a report dealing with the items discussed today.
Ms. Chirolf, anything to add?
I would simply add, Mr. Chair, that this is the beginning of you've initiated what is essentially a bylaw amendment process, but it's the very initial stages of the process. And so we would endeavor staff to come back to you fairly quickly with some discussion about potential guidelines and with the opportunity to have further discussion about uses that may or may not be appropriate for TUPs, because I think what we're hearing is that there are some things that should not perhaps be on the table, and you need to have a discussion about that, and that can happen before there's any kind of final adoption of amendment bylaws.
Thank you, Director Wilson.
I have no wish to prolong this any further, but I think in this particular case, uniformity is what Mr. Buchan is dealing with. The blanket coverage is perhaps a little bit of a misnomer, in as much as it's not going to say we will grant everything. It's to bring uniformity to all the areas, to say what you got here is the same as you got there. So I appreciate the concerns that Director Nicholson is bringing forward, but I see this as uniformity rather than having everything agreed straight away.
Thank you. Do you have the resolution written down, Ms. Boyd, by any chance?
Yes, I do, Chair. That it be recommended to the board that a special EASC committee meeting be scheduled regarding TUPs.
Going to call the question. All those in favor? Keep your hands up. And how many do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Motion fails. We have, so that concludes R4. You've got your marching orders. we have a R5 as boundary extension, so we'll go to that one. I'm hoping to, let's see what we got left here. Oh, let's plow through this. Okay, everyone, R4, Ms. Boyd, or
R5.
R5.
The report from the Emergency Management Division, Fire Rescue Services regarding boundary extension into Goldstream Heights Fire Protection Service Area.
Staff presenting on this, it's fairly, Rob, Mr. Schuler.
Good afternoon. This is a boundary extension through the petition process. As the committee may recall, we had 13 petitioners in batch mode, if you will. It was not a mass petition. It failed twice, and then we approached 13 property owners who signed on. So this is the petition to extend the boundary.
Director Segal.
I move the recommendation.
Seconded. Director Acton. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Unopposed? The motion carries. R6.
R6 report from the Utilities Division, Establishment Bylaw for Cowichan Bay Sewer Force Main Reserve Fund.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is to establish Cowichan Bay Force Main Reserve Fund. This is to facilitate a servicing agreement with Cowichan tribes for the Cowichan Bay sewer system. Similarly, we have an existing servicing agreement with Cowichan tribes for Eagle Heights sewer, and through that agreement, they do make contributions to the Eagle Heights sewers system capital reserve main for, or capital reserve fund for the force main replacement. So yeah, this is to facilitate a future servicing agreement with Cowichan tribes for the Cowichan Bay sewer system. And the proposed amount here is $6,000 annual contribution for all users of that infrastructure. So that would include Cowichan Bay sewer and Cowichan tribes.
Thank you. Director Abbott, I'm going to interject for just a second. Curious as to why this would be at Electoral Area Services.
I guess because it's utilities, areas D and E.
Yeah, but it involves another jurisdiction, so I'm just wondering. We could proceed with this. I'm just thinking it's more of a regionally entailed discussion as opposed to just electoral area. But are we okay to proceed with this and we can get clarification afterwards? Okay. Director Abbott.
I so move the staff recommendation.
Seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Next item, R7.
R7 report from the Utilities Division, Honeymoon Bay Water System Lease Agreement, Manulife Investment Management.
Yeah, so this report is to bring this lease agreement forward for existing infrastructure for the Honeymoon Bay Water System, the reservoir well, water treatment building, as well as the supply line that are located on the Manulife Investment Management lands. Since the CVRD acquired the Honeymoon Bay Water System, there, I believe, was several attempts to obtain a right-of-way or lease agreement, and there's some changes in staff with the ownership representation, and so we did initially request a statutory right-of-way, and based on the ownership's recommendation or wishes, they proposed a 2-year lease agreement, so the cost is $1,300 per year.
Could someone move that, please? Moved. Is there a seconder? Director Acton, thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. Ms. Boyd?
All right, report from the Community Planning Division, bylaw referral from Salt Spring Islands Trust, bylaw 536.
Director Acton, I was looking for a staff person, but Director
Oh,
Acton?
well, I'm willing to move the recommendation.
Pretty straightforward. Is there a seconder? We just had Mr. Tippett. Mr. Tippett, we just had someone move the recommendation, so hang on just a sec. Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Is there anything beyond the information contained in the report that we need to know, Mr. Tippett?
Mr. Chair, I don't think so. It's as noted by Director Acton. I think it's a fairly straightforward one, or maybe it was you who said that. It is. So I think the report speaks for itself. If there are any questions, I'll try to answer, however.
Any questions for Mr. Tippett? Director Nicholson?
Thank you. I was wondering why we get these things.
Mr. Tippett?
Yeah, I wonder that sometimes myself, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question, Director Nicholson. We're required to refer certain amendments to neighboring local governments, and I think the Islands Trust is similar in that respect. There is a possibility that we could look at maybe delegating to staff the responsibilities for responding to such referrals. That's something we can maybe propose later this year. The challenge there is then you're relying on staff to be able to distinguish between what might potentially be a controversial issue occurring in a neighboring jurisdiction versus a run-of-the-mill one like these two reports that I have this time. But anyway, in short, we receive them because the legislation and the procedures the province recommends require it, and at the moment, none of these are delegated to staff.
Director Martman?
Thank you, Chair. And sitting up here in the hinterlands of the CVRD and up against another RDN, I do like to see these referrals. I read through this one with interest, and I don't know if staff can comment. Are we likely to see anything like this happen in the CVRD? Because it appears to be F1 land and about 63 hectares, and it's being able to do multi-zone dwellings on it, and not multi-zone, multi-dwellings on this piece of property. Is so I'm wondering if we face this as a potential.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question, Director Martman. I think I guess any kind of request is possible. We have in the past been approached by large industrial forest landowners, and because our F1 zones typically permit one single-family dwelling per parcel, there is a nominal latent development potential on those lands that are not currently accessible, and so they've approached us over time, from time to time, informally, not actually making application, but the possibility of what they call density transfer, where those nominal development opportunities are transferred to another site to get more units on a single property. The regional district up to this point in such discussions has not been receptive to that idea. To my knowledge, nobody at the moment in our jurisdiction is proposing anything like this as an application. So I think it's probably unique to the Islands Trust at the moment.
Thank you. It helps.
Thank you. And I almost ruled the question out of order because it was a little outside the scope of interest unaffected or not. So any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed, the motion carries. R9.
Report from the Community Planning Division, bylaw referral from Thetis Islands Local Trust Committee.
Mr. Tippett, anything to introduce here?
Mr. Chair, I'll just say that, like the previous one, it's a relatively straightforward referral. In this particular case, the Thetis Island Trust Committee is looking at adding a couple of what they call associated islands, which are very close to Thetis itself, to their area that they do zoning for. it's probably a good thing. As opposed to not having zoning on them, it probably doesn't affect the interests of the regional district, given the proximity to Thetis Island, and it's nowhere near Vancouver Island. Well, I shouldn't say nowhere near, but it's 99% closer to Thetis Island than it is to Vancouver Island. So that's why the recommendation is what you see there.
So I look to Director McClinton. Do you have a question, or do you want to make a recommendation?
Yeah, quick question before I move the motion. I spent lots of time over in and amongst those islands on my boat. I know there's like some, I think they're called like oyster lots on some of those islands there. Like, this might be out of the scope of what I ask. Is it? Yeah, are those things impacted by this? And does it?
Go ahead, Mr. Tippett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't actually know the answer to that question. I expect that the Islands Trust Committee is probably aware of any sort of tenure areas where shellfish are grown, for example, or other matters. And however, it's within their jurisdiction to manage, and they will certainly find it easier to manage if they have zoning there. So that's all I can really say about it.
Thank you, Chair, for indulging me. I will move the recommendation.
Just wanting to make sure, is that the one that supports proposed? All right, it's been moved, seconded. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed, the motion carries. R10. And I have to apologize for Mr. Brisky. He was R1 and R10 and had to hang around for the whole darn thing. Mr. Brisky.
That's okay. I don't mind being first and last, but yeah. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Can you tell me why Area F came in last on the building dollar value again this year?
Probably because the community's in such good shape and they don't need to repair their buildings or anything like that. So looks good out there.
Thanks so much, Director Martman. Can't hear you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Brisky, for your reports. I look forward to this actually every year. And you make a comment. I wonder if you can expand on it. And it's basically you're talking about the evolution of farming and farm buildings. Can you expand on what that's all about?
Mr. Brisky.
Thank you, Director Martman. I guess, previously and through, the provisions of our older building bylaw, farming and farm buildings in the Farm Code of Canada were really categorized, I guess, as these sort of shacks that house equipment and livestock and things like that. And, what we're seeing is a lot of automation and a really more sort of maybe commercialized business coming out of the farming community. And so we have signals from the province that the Farm Code of Canada is going to likely be abolished in the next few years, and it's going to be incorporated into the building code. And, we're seeing a lot of farming communities look for other sources of income as well, with things like events and agritourism and things like that. So with the new provisions in our building bylaw and some of the training we'll be receiving this spring, we're going to have some tools to help facilitate the farming community in moving forward and having sustainable operations and making everything work for them.
And thank you. And a follow-up, if I can?
Go ahead.
And I think the follow-up I have is more about the content of the report in general. I know earlier, a month or so ago, you reported on costs for building permits, doing comparison between different jurisdictions. I'm wondering, and also, and another piece I'm always wondering about is time to getting the average building permit from once the application's completed. The timing, are building inspections meeting the timing of the builders. Like, do you have a way to incorporate information like that, or is it better for another report?
Mr. Brisky.
Through the chair to you, Director Martman. I mean, building permits are kind of funny. They rarely do come in complete, and complete can mean a number of different things depending on what's being proposed or what kind of logistics are associated with that project. But as I mentioned earlier, I think it's fair to say that a building permit could be processed in anywhere 4 weeks is appropriate. Certainly, if there are land use or other considerations that need to be managed in advance of a building permit, sometimes those things can take longer. But really, to answer your question, I can certainly include that information in future reports. We keep track of when applications are received and when those permits are issued, and we'd be able to find some sort of metric to describe that and inform the committee.
I don't know what others think about this, but it's certainly, those kind of trends, I think, if, not just one-offs, but the trends of those, of the times. And again, again, I mentioned about timing of building inspections too, about meeting the needs of builders, about those kind of trends also inform decision-making around a budget and, is it resourced enough, or why are we adding more time, or why are we doing so great? Like those kind of discussions at the board level, I think it would help my understanding. I'll leave it to others.
Thank you, Director Martman, and I can tell you that it was a great strides when we got the building department to start presenting these reports in this format, and it's quite a useful package of the way it is, and I can understand your desire to have more information, because quite often when we're approached by folks who we get the horror story of the 6-month-long building permit, but finding out after the fact that it was submitted incomplete or the like. So those are challenges. But before I go to Ms. Chirolf, one of the things that I noted is 2023 wasn't a really great year as far as building permits and new housing starts. And I think I might have asked you to crystal ball gaze a little bit the last time you were before us. Have you noted any trends in the types of applications that we're getting in the door and the volume just as of late? Because it looks like in general we haven't had as many new houses built and as much building inspection activity in this past year. And it could just simply be the higher interest rate, the higher inflation costs. But have you noted anything in particular?
Certainly, Director Morrison. Yeah, I think, the economic climate likely has a lot to do with what's out there. There isn't an abundance of land in the regional district that's ready to be built on right now, and it certainly may not be fiscally viable for a lot of people to build on it if it was there. I keep in regular communication with building inspectors at the membered municipalities, and we certainly did note a correlation between interest rate changes and applications coming through the door. So I would say that does have a big influence. I think people are watching closely for what's coming. And to answer the second part of your question, we are seeing a lot of applications, maybe not for, grand scale projects, but we have lots of tenant improvements and small commercial spaces, and we are seeing people, make minor improvements to their dwelling units and things like that to incorporate more living space and storage and things like that. So.
Thank you for that. And I was hoping Ms. Chirolf would chime in here as well. Ms. Chirolf.
Well, I wanted to back up a bit and just to speak in sort of support of the work that our building inspection staff do. They work tremendously hard and efficiently, and I've seen permits go out in 2 weeks or less, where, the information they have is complete. But it's important to recognize that they're often the last approving authority in the chain of approvals that's needed in a regional district, right? And so quite often the approval process may start with an application to the provincial government, whether that's subdivision or water licensing. There may be planning approvals that are required in the form of development permits, rezoning, et cetera. So there's a whole bunch of, things that can be happening or required to happen before building inspection is in a position to issue a permit. And sometimes bonds need to be posted or conditions of development permits need to be met. So there are lots of things that have to happen. They're doing their best, I know, to get permits out the door quickly, but I like to say that in defense of them, who often become the target of criticism for permits not being obtained quickly, and it's it's a complicated story, especially in a regional district.
Thank you for that. Director McClinton, to close.
Oh, I'm off mute. I'm good. Thank you, Chair. Just a thought or comment. I don't know the appropriateness of how it would fit into this, but obviously the CVRD includes several municipalities. I'm just curious if, like, maybe on an annual basis or semi-annual basis, like if they provide these numbers to their councillors, it'd be neat to see how it fits together. Yeah, and just curious if that's a possibility. If not, I completely understand the logistical challenges of getting those numbers.
Was that a question?
The question, thanks, Jared. The question is, would we be able to see permits issued from our municipal neighbors on a semi-annual basis?
Who wants to take that one?
So I could speak to that. Or, I mean, Sunny could speak to that as well. I mean, obviously that information will be typically provided by municipal staff to the municipalities. It's public information. We could, request that be emailed. We could, send it out via email potentially. But another sort of mechanism, is to think about that perhaps as in a later discussion about an optional regional planning function, which would be tracking housing starts essentially across the region. So put a pin in that, I would suggest.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Ms. Boyd.
Thank you, Chair. We have no unfinished business, no new business. We have question period. I look to the gallery. No?
Nobody online?
I don't have anyone online. We move to closed session. Motion that the meeting be closed to the public in accordance with the Community Charter, Part 4, Division 3, Section 90, subsections as noted in accordance with the agenda item. We have CSM 1, closed session of Electoral Area Committee minutes of November 15th, CSM 2, special closed session Electoral Area Services Committee minutes of December 6th, CSR 1, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service that are at the preliminary stages and that, in the view of the council, committee, could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the regional district if they were held in a public forum. So that would be section 91K and CSNB1. This was the new item. It's a verbal of employee relations. That's section 91C.
Motion to move into close, moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. We have a new meeting to go into, correct?
Yes, we do.
We have, so everyone should have the link, and let's be back here in 8 minutes. Ready to go.